understand the apparent sacking of the head of Shin Bet, the intelligence or security service. That's something that's not ever happened before in Israeli history, because the view has always been that they were there to defend the kingdom and not the king.
That's exactly right. And in fact, it's sacrosanct. It's statutorily determined in Israeli law that the role of the Shin Bet is, among other things, to defend the institutions of the democratic state of Israel. So that's part of their job. And Netanyahu is really, I would say, he's pushing the head of the Shin Bet to the limit. But it's so confusing. I have to tell you that even Israelis can't follow. There is one lawless act after the other. So in this period of time that I'm speaking with you, Netanyahu has just sworn in Itamar Ben-Gvir to become again his Minister for National Security. Ben-Gvir, you know...
He was the very right-wing one who left first time.
That's right. That's right. He's a nationalist extremist, a guy who's been convicted of hate crimes and terror 13 times, and he quit when the ceasefire began. Netanyahu now has reappointed him, but it's illegal. The Attorney General reminded Netanyahu yesterday that because Ben-Gvir is currently under investigation for abusing his power as minister, he can't currently be appointed. Netanyahu has gone ahead and done it anyway. He seems determined similarly to go ahead firing the head of the Shin Bet despite the Attorney General's warning. And what we're hearing today is he's planning on firing the Attorney General herself as early as Sunday.
Wow, Noga. Extraordinary scenes there in Israel. Thank you very, very much indeed for that. Coming up, if you're listening to the show from a black cab right now, then please stay with us, because your future may be at risk. At the time now, 6:48.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
Can you understand why Israeli ground operations have resumed, or do you think they're now clearly breaking international law? Britain should now react to it.
Ian Dale on LBC.
Most homes could save with Octopus Energy.
I've dealt with many utility companies for many years across several properties, and Octopus are an absolute breath of fresh air.
I should have done it years ago by the looks of things.
Octopus Energy, outstanding value with award-winning customer service. Visit octopus.energy/value for our calculation.
One voice can only do so much. But lots of voices can change the world. Whatever helping nature looks like for you. From spreading the word to becoming a member, or helping wildlife where you live. Find your flock with the RSPB, because together we fly. Act for nature now at rspb.org.uk. The RSPB is a registered charity.
The new £5 meal deal from McDonald's. Get a cheeseburger or mayo chicken, medium fries, 4 McNuggets, and a medium soft drink. So guess what? That's right, £5. It's not called the £5 meal deal for nothing. From 11 a.m. Not available on delivery. Carbonated soft drink upgrade fees apply. Participating restaurants subject to availability.
Beat the April energy cap rise. Fix your price with Octopus Energy, Britain's #1 choice. Visit octopus.energy/1.
This is LBC. Message Andrew Marr on WhatsApp now on 0345 6060 973.
6:50. We live in the age of the strong man, the authoritarian ruler. Well, you know that unless you've been living under a stone. Now the Turkish version, President Erdogan, has shocked the financial markets by arresting his most serious political rival, the popular mayor of Istanbul, and raiding the homes of no fewer than 106 opponents. Let's hear now from Lenya Dostoli. Lenya, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Can you explain to people why he's done this and why the timing has happened like this?
Right, so this morning we woke up to the news that, as you say, more than 100 people were arrested along, and including the popular Istanbul mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu. In terms of the timing, well, yesterday actually we heard the news after several weeks of speculation that the mayor's university degree had been revoked. And this is an important move because on Sunday, next Sunday, the CHP, the party is part of the Republican People's Party, was set to nominate him as the next presidential candidate. Of course, the reaction from the CHP and from the wider opposition has been a condemnation. Some people have even, including the chair of the CHP, they have called it a coup against the legitimate opposition. Many people say that this basically cancels any possibility of change through the ballot box.
Because Erdogan has been a very, very powerful figure for a long time in Turkey. Was there any sense that had he not intervened, the opposition might have actually finally got rid of him, toppled him?
Well, there's no the next election is slated for 2028. However, that's a long way away, and there's some criticism actually of the CHP as to why they have decided to nominate their candidate so early, exposing him potentially to repercussions, such as what happened today. Let's remember also that Erdogan himself is not able to run in the election in 2028 because this would be his third term as president after 2 more as prime minister. And if he wants to run, he has 2 options. Basically, one would be to call an early election or change the constitution, which some of his party have been actually talking about.
Elena, we don't know Turkey very well. Just explain a little bit about Erdogan's politics, particularly when it comes to Islam.
Well, that's a complicated question to answer, but
sorry, but
it's, in 2019, he came. In 1999, actually, there was a parallel between what happened to Imamoglu today and what happened to Erdogan in 1999, because he was jailed for 4 months after making a speech where he was accused of incitement. The speech was from a religious nationalist poem, and that obviously propelled him to power. Basically, then Erdogan obviously has a lot of support from conservatives across Turkey, including many Kurdish conservatives. At the same time, his politics, I would say, it's not based on necessarily religion. It's been used in religion
using it, but no enthusiasm for the great secular revolutionary tradition of Kemal Atatürk, which is where modern Turkey began. That was all I was trying to establish.
Well, definitely, it's again, it's a little more complicated than that. But there certainly have been 2 camps in Turkey in the past 20 years: the secularist nationalist camp and the conservative religious nationalist camp.
Yeah.
But both of them, I would say, they hope. I mean, if you are Turkish, you have to
be in one side. It's a really, really complicated but very, very important story. Elena, thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC. And right, so here is a London story that I think everyone can have an opinion about. The iconic black taxi is much part of the capital as pigeons and bike lanes, and which traces its ancestry back to the first horse-drawn hackney carriages, which were licensed in 1662, is heading for extinction in just 20 years' time, according to the think tank the Centre for London. Let's talk now to Antonia Jennings, Chief Executive of the Centre for London, who conducted the research.
fronts. So the operating costs of having a black cab have skyrocketed. So that's obviously everything from taking the cab to the garage, but also through to charging up your black cab if in electric, which many are. On top of that, we've obviously seen the cost of living crisis. So, that's affected consumers and their willingness to spend quality on the black cab. And then on top of that, we've seen a real drop-off in applicants for the knowledge, which is, of course, the qualification you need to become a black cab driver.
And is that simply because everyone's got the electronic map systems? I'm trying to avoid, names of them, but that we all use to get around. We click on our phone and it tells us how to get from A to B, and therefore you might say, is the knowledge useful anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a valid question, and I think what this research has shown is that the knowledge is incredibly useful. It's still seen as the global standard and the global leader in local knowledge qualifications, but it is in dire need of reform. At the moment, we know that the knowledge takes over 3 years to complete, sometimes a lot longer, and we know that the drop-off rate for people starting the knowledge is around 2/3. So that's a massive problem. So we're suggesting through this report that we need a sort of 10-year strategy for how many black cabs we need on the road, and then obviously correlating kind of campaigns to encourage people into the industry.
And you've come up with some ideas about how the government can help. Just explain to people what they are.
Absolutely. So we've taken inspiration from other places, and in the first instance, namely Scotland. So in Scotland, you get an interest-free loan to purchase your taxi or black cab. We're suggesting the same needs to be extended to London. We've also said that TfL's scrappage scheme, which is due to run out next year, needs to be extended. So the scrappage scheme is essentially, yes.
Antonia, we've run out of time for that, but thank you very much, Antonia Jennings, for that. I'm going to be back with you tomorrow. A couple of quick notes from people who've texted in about our main story today. Gareth in Pontypridd says, Andrew, it's not just that boys develop slower than girls, it's that we punish behaviour in girls from a young age, we tolerate to much later age in boys, and this is just unacceptable of everyday sexism. And we've got this from Andrew in working for the past decade. White men and boys have been demonised as representatives of an oppressive, misogynistic patriarchy. Displays of masculinity are quickly shot down as toxic. And many more comments coming in all the time. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio, as well as listen to podcasts. Download now for free from your App Store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish, but right now, it's time for Ian Day.
Thanks, Andrew. Israel has restarted the war against Hamas in Gaza, using the justification that Hamas still haven't returned all the hostages and won't commit to doing so. Hundreds of people have been killed in the last 3 days, and Israel is said to be preventing aid and food deliveries going into Gaza. Can you understand why Israeli ground operations have resumed, or do you think they're now clearly breaking international law, and the international community should now react accordingly? What should our own government do? On cross question at 8, Conservative MP George Freeman, Labour MP Bel Ribeiro-Addy, former Cabinet Minister Justine Greening, and anti-homelessness campaigner Matthew Talbot. And at 9, do our gun laws need to be reformed? Why does anyone need to own a gun?
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 7 o'clock, the White House has suggested the US could take over Ukraine's power plants to ensure their security. Donald Trump has insisted his peace plan is very much on track following a phone call with Volodymyr Zelensky. The Ukrainian president says he believes lasting peace can be achieved this year with his support. LBC's Washington correspondent Simon Marks explains what else was discussed.
Very importantly, President Trump was asked by Volodymyr Zelensky for more anti-aircraft systems and was told that the president is going to help him try and source those, particularly in Europe.
Yesterday, Vladimir Putin rejected a ceasefire proposal during a phone call with President Trump, but he promised not to target Ukraine's energy supply. Kyiv says Moscow struck its power grids overnight. Grigory Levinsky, a former opposition leader in Russia, told Tonight with Andrew Marr
police service in the country can interrogate that. The second, which I think is more significant, is that I believe it's essential that if you want to purchase a gun, you can get a license or certificate from your own police force.
The man has been charged with the murder of his wife after her body was discovered in a car in East London last year. 23-year-old Pankaj Lambert is believed to have left the country. Harshita Brella was found in Ilford last November. The Liberal Democrat leader has told LBC the government's changes to the welfare system will keep him awake at night. It's thought 1.2 million people with disabilities will lose thousands of pounds because of the reforms. Ministers hope they'll save £5 billion a year, but details of exactly where cuts will be made aren't yet public. So Ed Davey, whose son can't walk or talk because of a serious neurological condition, has told us it's deeply unfair.
That uncertainty, lack of clarity, causes a lot of fear out there, and there'll be some people like carers like myself that will be worried if you're really struggling to make ends meet, that will keep people awake.
And Edinburgh has been chosen to provide the backdrop to the start of the 2027 Tour de France. Scotland, England and Wales will share 6 stages of the world's biggest cycling event. For the first time, both the men's and women's races will kick off in the same country.
LBC Business Update.
With Who's Off, the easy way to manage staff leave and absence.
The cash access network Link has recommended 19 new banking hubs as Santander announces plans to close more branches. 139 have so far been set up, with the government committing to 350 over the course of this parliament. The hubs are similar to a traditional bank branch, but the space is shared by multiple banks. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed at 1 point at 87.06. The pound buys $1.29 and €1.19. LBC weather, largely dry night with a chance of showers in Shetland. Cloudy over southern England, a low of -5. Much of the UK will be dry tomorrow with plenty of sunshine. Some patchy clouds developing for central areas in the afternoon. Highs of
entering corridor that cuts off Gaza City from southern Gaza, and also a regular infantry brigade being added to the troops on the Philadelphia corridor to start moving a bit north and expanding the buffers. That's where we are now, and Israeli leaders and my own sources tell me that this will continue to escalate, continue to expand. The way that Hamas can stop it is to agree to the offer that is on the table.
And does this action really have the support of the Israeli people? Because obviously most Israelis want to see the end of Hamas and see them expelled from Gaza. But there, I think, has been some disquiet about some of the actions of the Netanyahu government, particularly stopping aid going into Gaza. How much support does the government retain among the population?
There is certainly a significant chunk of the population which believes that Netanyahu is doing this to short-term coalitions, with massive budgets, require that the Shin Bet intelligence service, get rid of the Attorney General. My own personally, you have tens of thousands of people out in the streets demonstrating in front of Netanyahu's house for that very reason. And they say going back to war is going to endanger the hostages. So they must have an airstrike, or Hamas might decide to take revenge and shoot them like they've done in the past, shot groups of hostages and puppets. So that is certainly a chunk of the population. There's part of the population who is saying now that interact directly with Hamas ceasefire. We need to win this war. The way to actually force them to release more hostages is to have the military. Sitting around in the borders is not going to do it. So I would say the population is split, but there's certainly a real debate which goes down to the deepest values, that you could have. Should the hostages come forward first, or should defeating this terrorist organization that we have on October 7th come first? And there's really no easy answer to that.
How many hostages are there remaining, and how many of them do we know are still alive?
So there's 59 hostages remaining. There's 2 non-Israelis. Israel says that there are probably 24. So at most there's 24. They won't declare that someone's dead until they have multiple hard evidence, intelligence to say that. So at most it's 24, but that formulation means it's probably less.
Okay, Lisa, thank you. That's Lisa Berman, diplomatic correspondent for the Times of Israel. Tobias Elwood is a defence and security analyst, former UK Middle East minister. Tobias, good evening. What do you make of this resumption of Israeli military action in Gaza? We've heard the justification there from Lisa Berman. Many people in this country are horrified by it. What's your view?
Sometimes in life, it can feel like you're disappearing into the crowd. We all do it, dip below the radar. There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes you want to find something more. With the RAF Reserve, you can break away from the crowd and find yourself with a new one, like these refugees we're delivering aid to. And be back feeling a little different on a Monday morning. RAF Reserves Woodvale are now recruiting for spare time roles. Search RAF Reserves. Find something more. Find your force.
One first died. We could have worked out how to prepare a legendary roast. Mum died again because she asked me what my name was. On the 10th of March, Mum died a final time, surrounded by her family.
With dementia, you die again, and again, and again. Which is why at Alzheimer's Society, we'll be with you again, and again, and again.
Ian Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
17 minutes past 7 on LBC. Let's go to Peter in West Hampstead. Peter, very good evening. What would you like to tell me?
It's the definition of madness, which is to do the same thing again and again and imagining that magically something different is going to happen. And this seems to me a summing up of Netanyahu's battle plans. I think what he's got to do is what we the Americans did in Berlin in 1945. Berlin got thoroughly bombed, but then you just got to send the troops in, you've got to go from house to house, you've got to assess and evaluate, you've got to do it the hard way, and sort it in that fashion. It's a difficult way of doing it. It's not easy. It's very easy to drop bombs. But in the end, you just got to go from house to house. But I think what the Palestinians need is an alternative to Hamas that has real teeth, but isn't militaristic. And that's quite difficult, to give an organisation real teeth, something to make Netanyahu a little frightened. And it may be that what we can do in London is to set up a conference of Palestinian residents in London and say, how can this be done?
But it's interesting what you make now, but isn't this where the Fatah leadership in the West Bank are singularly failing in whatever mission they have? Because you never hear much from them nowadays. They've been completely eclipsed by Hamas, but there is a gap into which they could tread now, isn't there? And yet they don't seem to be able to do so. I'm not expert enough in this region to be able to explain why not, but that would be the natural thing that I would thought ought to happen.
Well, I think it would have happened if it could have happened, but I think Fatah is just not up to it. I think one needs a really good, strong, unlikable, charismatic character to be found, and I think this is achievable. But how we do it in such a big distance is difficult to know. It may be that the Palestinian diaspora, if that's the right word, in London, could have a big conference right down the street. They may have some suggestions as to how one can give an alternative to Hamas strength and to be able to fight Netanyahu, but without having a militaristic, violent component.
Well, that's an interesting suggestion. Let's see where that goes. I'm not sure talking shop is actually going to help here. In a sense, the leadership has got to come from the Palestinian people themselves. Leadership has also got to come from the United States and the Israeli government. People may laugh at that, but whatever you think of Netanyahu, he is the Prime Minister of Israel. There is no one else to deal with in terms of the government of Israel. And I think Donald Trump, I hate to sort of put this on him because but he has got a track record of doing positive things in the Middle East with the Abraham Accords, the prime example. So you would hope that he might be able to have some sort of positive influence on Netanyahu. But even as I'm saying those words, I think that is ridiculous. Let's go to Sam in Ilford. Hello, Sam.
Hi, in answer to your question, I guess the key things I would like our government to do is, number one, be genuine and truthful with the facts. So this ceasefire was broken by Israel and not by Hamas. It's supposed to go stage 2 or phase 2 of ceasefire, which was discussions about withdrawal and rebuilding. And instead, Israel Israel has come with a new plan of trying to extend the ceasefire with all the hostages out. So they need to be truthful with the facts and also be truthful in how they describe whether it's a war crime to war crime in Ukraine. It's also a pending war crime in Gaza. So there seems to be this massive reluctance to say anything anti-Israel. So that's one thing. Second, stop calling themselves Israel. Now that would be symbolic for most members of America, but it would be a significant symbolic gesture because it would show America, who is supposed to be, Britain's closest friend, that actually they are taking a moral stance against Israel. And the third thing is support the Arab plan. So Egypt, Jordan, and the Arab countries put forward a plan for the rebuilding of Gaza, which involves a new government and a future that bright building for Gaza. And Jordan and the Arab states have said to Israel they would guarantee their security if you follow a two-state solution. So at the moment, when Neil starts saying two-state solution is important for that stuff, when you can show it actually by formally supporting the Arab plan, which will then distance themselves from this ridiculous plan that Trump has of taking over Gaza, and will show that we are actually taking a stance against what Israel is doing. And I think that, for me, would show that my government is doing something wrong and was really a horrible situation at the moment.
What do you think about what Putin said about having some sort of conference in London which might show a way forward for the Palestinians?
I didn't hear all of it because I wasn't talking, but yeah, I actually think, look, dialogue ultimately is what will win here, and which is about what's going on, because the idea that you can bomb a people or an ideology to death is never going to work. So I do think talking will work, and I do also think that if you can have a conference and you can have a peace summit for Ukraine and bring all the leaders in, there's no reason why they can't do that also for the Middle East, which is as important a conflict. So I do think that will help, and I don't mind the idea that Hamas, while they're a terrorist organization, I don't mind the idea that they're not willing to have violence, and that's because they've done it plenty of times, and they themselves have said they're willing to give up governing Gaza where there's an alternative map. So if they see the talks are happening, and they see that there is a plan from major allies, to be fair, Europe is quite distinct to America in how they view the situation. Europe is very clear on the two-state solution, very clear on some other elements compared to America. I do think that would make a difference. It may not seem it, but I do think it would make a difference. And also, I think, sometimes we know how polarizing this debate is in the UK, and you almost want people literally on two sides of this argument. I think something like that would potentially bring everybody together, because you move past the dislike and the inability to see each other's points of views to actually discussing it and trying to make a way forward. I'm all for thought. I've got some friends on Facebook who are very pro-Israel. I'm all for thought. It's much like what they're saying. Actually, they try to sit down and have a discussion with them. Try to so that we can see each other's points of views. That ultimately is what will get us through, and that's what happened in the Oslo Accord, isn't it? That they brought two parties together, which actually and saw that there was a lot of commonality between them.
Yeah, but at the moment it's quite difficult to see that happening, isn't it? Because people are so entrenched, and I notice that generally from the phone-ins that we have on the subject on LBC, that people are so either anti-Israel or anti-Palestinian that they can't see the wood for the trees, they can't see any commonality at all, and just continue having echo chambers or silos. And that's symptomatic of our public discourse at the moment in lots of areas, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's where I don't think you can underestimate the importance of leadership. And at the moment, unfortunately, we do have a world where we've got very polarized leaders, whether it's America, in Israel, Hamas, in India, in North Korea, wherever, in Russia, you've got an absolute lack of proper leadership all over the world. And I think until you get some proper leadership, and it may be that because we don't have enough single good leaders, we need to bring a group of people together to do this. But unless you get some proper leadership, you're never going to get through this. And if you do get proper leadership, then you can find a way through. You can bring people out. You're not going to bring, the whole thing. You don't have to bring everybody. As long as you bring a significant or a powerful enough minority who are polarized together, you can, I think, make a change. And that's where you can have a cultural leadership on this if you wanted to. But I don't know, there is this, as much as I know people don't like talking about, but I feel there is this pro-Israel lobby that does allow maybe the government
who you think is lobbying to prevent discussion. I can assure you there's no one lobbying me or lobbying us to prevent the discussion. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having it now, I guess. Sam, thank you very much indeed. Matt is in the call in various Netherlands. Matt, very good evening.
Good evening. I missed the last minute of what your previous caller was saying. I do think he made lots of valid points, and I wanted to come into the kind of discussion around how to have the debate. I mean, you've only got to look online, you've only got to kind of listen to how people are shut down on both sides. Now, I'm not going to say that anti-Semitism doesn't exist among protesters and among people having a voice. That's foolish and inaccurate. But what I will say is I have seen this determination over the years, not just within the last year, but there's a relentless determination to see this criticism of the behaviour of the Israeli state as automatic support for a terrorist organisation or inherently anti-Semitic. It's not like we all suddenly decided in the last year that, oh, we've got an excuse now we can just shout out about how much we hate the Jews. It's just unfathomable to some people that our reaction to what's happening in Gaza is possibly just maybe about something else, like the actual behaviour of what is happening. You do not go after a needle in a haystack by incinerating the haystack and claiming that everyone there is a needle anyway, or voted for it, or supported it, or just saying, well, you know, casualties of war, they use human swords. You don't expect people to just be okay with that and then smear them and harass them and shut down any discussion because they are not okay with it. And I'm really getting fed up at this rhetoric and this kind of labelling. I mean, what did Suella Braverman said something like, these are hate marches last year. I never heard her say a single criticism about the riots that occurred in the summer. I didn't hear her say one thing about that. These were people who were burning down hotels, were being set on fire because there were asylum seekers. There were this perpetuated myth about the identity of that child killer. Before anyone even knew what they were dealing with, it just led to this rampant kind of attack on immigrants and the Muslim community, and it wasn't based on any kind of reality of the situation that was allowed to fester. And I didn't hear her say one thing about that. But all these people protesting about the situation in Gaza and Israel, we're an anti-Semitic mob, we're all members of hate marches, and I'm just tired of this rhetoric. So I think there's a real current and prominent barrier to the discourse because of situations like that, and MPs who are, well, thankfully former Home Secretary, who's just not held to account over things like that, and it's not okay.
Okay, Matt, thank you very much for your call. Luke says, how do we know the numbers of death when Hamas are giving the numbers? Hamas can't be trusted, so why are we taking their numbers as facts? What people also need to realise is Hamas use human shields, so that is why so many women and kids are being killed. Why don't the cosplayers, I don't know what that word is, condemn that reality? I know the answer because they are anti-Semites. Well, look, I rather agree with Matt's point there that not everyone who is supporting Palestine or the Palestinian people, not all of them are anti-Semites. I don't think that the majority of people who've been on these marches are anti-Semites. Some of them are. I think Matt just admitted that case himself, or the previous caller did. That doesn't make everybody who criticises Israel an anti-Semite, and I think we do need to acknowledge that. We'll come to more of your calls in a moment. And, of course, on Cross Question at 8 o'clock, we have the Labour MP Bel Ribeiro Addy, Conservative MP George Freeman, former Conservative Cabinet Minister Justine Greening, and Matthew Torbet. Excuse me. The anti-homelessness campaigner. Let's go to the news headlines at 7:30 with Amelia Cox.
Donald Trump says he had a very good phone call with Volodymyr Zelensky, insists his peace plans are very much on track. White House has suggested the US could take over Ukrainian power plants to ensure their security. The Home Secretary says there are some very serious and disturbing questions to answer after a teenager was jailed for at least 49 years. 19-year-old Nicholas Prosper murdered his mother, brother and sister at the same time as he plotted a school shooting. And a 23-year-old man from Northamptonshire has been charged with murdering his wife, whose body was found in a car in East London. It's thought Pankaj Lamba left the UK in November last year when 24-year-old Harshita Brella was discovered.